And that's actually what he was just saying. You got to challenge, you got to interrogate your own set of assumptions and find out if they're valid or based on preference and privilege, if there's actually some validity to them. And you start breaking down all the kind of consciousness that wants to plaster no smoking signs on every flat surface in the immediate proximity of a plutonium dump. Okay, there's two things happening with that. Okay, one is a manifestation of delusion. You got denial going on, and you got a diversion going on. You're trying to displace onto something convenient that which is much less convenient to try to confront. And what you're confronting there is a national security strait. If you're dealing with plutonium, your neighbors, probably poorer neighbors, if you decide to go with the anti-smoking thing, all right? But you got a progressive consensus that this is all for, well, what would it be for? Aside from comfort, convenience, and a reinforcement of privilege. Well, the alternative, it is take those poor, less educated people and do something for their own good. Have we heard this before? Yeah. So, you confront that kind of thing, which actually works its way out in a more structural sense to people, well, keeping that which is kind of other and a little bit plebeian and inconvenient out of their communities, which creates these communities under I-70, which are not populated by those who are privileged and elite and enlightened, and consequently make good dumping grounds for the cigarette butts, figuratively speaking, or the toxic chemicals, or the sewage treatment plant, or the, well, I can keep going. You understand? Those things connect. And you don't hear it getting connected in terms of environmental movement, in terms of progressive movement in general. We have a policy issue. That word came up. Where is policy formulated? What is the entity, the mechanism for formulation, the application, and the enforcement? It's something called the state. Progressives, so-called, sometimes even anarchists, so-called, turn to the state as the entity to solve the problems they confront. The state is the source of the problems. You got a sort of alchemy of consciousness going on here, that the solution to the problem is the source of the problem. Yes, yes, and if we do the correct incantations, we can take this bar of lead, repeat the same experiment long enough, circle that cauldron of bubbling fluid, and eventually it's going to turn out gold. Well, if you believe one, you better be believing the other. But that is a kind of consciousness that is not going to get you anywhere out of the mire you find yourself in now. So, you want to take that one and run with it? Okay, you can start just about any point you want to in Denver. I assume you're from Denver. We could probably sit here and list about, in the time available, 2,000 different points of departure of things that you need to confront and just say no to in Denver. All right, pick one. And approach it based upon your inclinations, your aptitude, your consciousness, and use that as the crucible of transforming your consciousness to the point where you can attack, attach, and transcend something else, or something else is. Yeah?
I think that's great. And a couple things. One is, I think we're both probably going to talk a lot about revolution, whatever that may mean.
Not me.
Okay. Well, I may talk about revolution, whatever that may mean. And I'm going to get to something about that in a second. I also want to just sort of say for the record that I think that there can be very important, I don't want to use the R, the reform word, but I think that there can be very important, sometimes it's very important also to apply Band-Aids. And I don't have a problem with the application of Band-Aids to any circumstance so long as you recognize that it is no more than the application of a Band-Aid. Great examples of that are, I have no problem, obviously, with women working on rape crisis hotlines or in battered women's shelters. That's really important work, as long as they also recognize that that's not going to stop the tsunami of violence by men against women. And it's the same on any other issues, that I don't have a problem. I mean, I've done enough timber sale appeals myself, trying to work within the the regulations of the state, and also every acre I ever helped to save was cut under the salvage rider, which is the point. And so I think that that work can be helpful so long as you recognize that that is nothing more than a Band-Aid. So that's the first part. The second part is, for me, and I think one of the important realizations I had several years ago was that the government is a government of occupation, and the culture is a culture of occupation. Of course, all my American Indian friends said, what the hell took you so long to figure this one out? And so at that point, for me, there was a huge transformation in understanding because, you know, people say, are you going to vote? Blah, blah, blah. And I think that it does make a difference. If you're in occupied Nazi Germany, I would rather be in Denmark than Poland, you know, because Hans Frank was a worse governor. But in both cases, you're still under occupied territory. And what is the function of a government of occupation? It's to extract resources and extract resources. That's the primary function. And it's not to serve communities, and it's not to live sustainably, whatever that. Well, see, there's also the question of defining reality, because sustainably as defined by the dominant culture is bullshit. And there is, however, I mean, it is possible to live sustainably. I mean, people were doing it on this continent for at least 12,000 years if you believe the myth of science, and if you believe the stories told by the people themselves, and it's since the beginning of time. And so it's possible to live sustainably. There's a real meaning by that. I want to say one more thing, too. I was just talking to Karen about this earlier today, that I think one of the central questions, too, is with whom or what do you identify? And part of that can be in really practical sense. If you ask, where does your water come from? If you say your water comes from the tap, then you will defend the system that generates the water that comes out through the tap to the death. If you believe that your food comes from the grocery store, you will defend the system that feeds you to the death. If you believe, on the other hand, that the water comes from a stream, comes from underground, you will defend that. No, not if you believe. If you know that the water comes from underground, if you know that your food comes from the land base, you will defend that to the death. And so a lot of it has to do with what/whom do you identify?
You're giving me room to run here, but that wouldn't be off the off question. So I don't know whether to pick up where he just left off, and then we're starting to do volleyball between ourselves, or put it back to you. First of all, is there anybody got a pressing question you want to hear? This go a little further.
You know, I'm gonna have to stand up because I'm pushing like 5 feet tall over here. But I don't really have a question. I have more of a comment, and it's kind of maybe venting frustration. Because it's difficult to hear, and I'm not attacking you. What can I do? Well, there's so many things to do, and there's events happening all the time. You know, Transform Columbus. How many people got arrested? Well, I see some of y'all that did. But I mean, we had been talking about this forever, and then when it came down to it, nobody did it. And oh, you know, I can't get arrested. They don't have any warrants. There's nothing going on. Well, these things need to happen in order for change to happen. And then on campus, there's always discussions of whether it's Free Palestine, movies on Iraqis. I mean, there's always something going on, but my schedule doesn't make it up. For whatever reason, people don't attend these events. I'm a therapist at Lincoln High School and at Clinton Middle School. Today I have 4 kids. One kid who's Native American, and the teacher told him that they were savages and that all these things. He had a little medicine pouch. The teacher took it apart, brought the advisors in because they thought it might have marijuana in it. A kid got kicked out of class today for speaking Spanish. I mean, these things are happening now every day. And so I just have a hard time with just, you know, what do we do? Well, let's first of all open our eyes, and then let's get involved and see what's happening. Let's watch Democracy Now! Instead of South Park, or, you know, whatever it is, and attend some of these events. Right now, I'm like the only Latina in my master's program, which is so sad. And then the curriculum is all Eurocentric, and it's all geared to one population. The DSM-4 doesn't relate to Mexicans. These assessments don't, but then we're not getting anything in lieu of. I'm sorry, but you know, I'm just having I just feel like there's so much that we can be doing, but we only pick, and not that we can attend to all the causes out there, but we just kind of pick one thing and we feel sad for the fish, but then there's kids that are dying, and there's kids that are, this is happening to, and Latinos and everything that's happening. I just feel frustrated and angered, and I just feel like if we were really committed and we really wanted to create change, there are so many ways every single day to do that. And I think one of it is not to be so isolated. Denver is so segregated. We might even be Alabama. We know where the white people live. We know where Mexicans live. We know where black people live. Nobody cruises up and down Federal. Nobody goes to 5 Points unless they're going to Cafe Nuba to have some sort of awakening experience, to go listen to open words and open mic and spoken words, and that's the only time that they'll ever go there. But they don't shop in those districts. They don't go to BBB and see these little shirts, that our little 5-year-olds are wearing, and then wonder why we have the highest teen pregnancy rate. I'll be done. I'm sorry.
No. First of all, don't be sorry. I said that 3 times. There's nothing to be sorry about. Put it down. Put it down. But yeah, okay, you bring up an interesting example. We may have made a tactical error here. I'll just maybe put this out publicly for the first time. We used to do, in the Columbus stuff, phase 1, we didn't have a 4 directions march. It was a confrontational thing. People came to confront the parade. And in 92, we had 2,500, 3,000, I don't know. We had mass turnout, and people were ready to go. Then we have this hiatus. But now, instead of just confrontation, we got to present an alternative too. And that's fine. You should present the alternative if you're going to confront. So we incorporate the 4 directions march on the same day as the parade, and we got a couple thousand people, 3,000 people maybe. I don't know. Again, I don't count that well. We had a whole bunch of people. Now we've broken the 4 directions march off from the confrontation. And there's a certain logic to that, not to corrupt our alternative with what it is we're confronting. So what was the turnout at the 4 directions march this year? 2,000 people showed up to take a walk and to celebrate unity and to feel good. And the next day, when it came time for the confrontation, there were 200 people on the street. 1 in 10 actually took it from feel good into any kind of action. And this was not particularly significant or consequential or risky action. Newsflash. Change implies taking risk. Change implies dedication, commitment, and struggle, and sacrifice. Sacrifice. You got to be willing to invest something more than a good time and a walk in the sun. And it's not a rock concert. It's not a fashion statement. It's not a change in diet. It's not reading all the works of Jack Kerouac. It's not taking the right drugs. It's not riding bicycles instead of doing cars. It's no painless way to do the undoing of that which inflicts pain as a concomitant of its existence. And the pain doesn't go away because you avoid it. Maybe you can displace it from a position of privilege, leaving it on a child she was talking about, emblematic of all the children that suffer the burden of this system. But if you're serious in any sense at all about actually making change rather than making a progressive fashion statement, you're going to have to do more than show up on the night when you know you can't possibly be arrested for the weighty offense of, what do they charge us with? Loitering. Wow. Heavy karma. Probably going to get us disbarred and disemployed. Loitering. If you can't risk that, then stay home. Don't come celebrate. You got nothing to celebrate because nothing's going to change. The unity isn't unity, it's a party. Yeah? So we need to be bringing that 4 directions march back into the context of struggle where it belongs, which is on the Saturday when the parade occurs, if it occurs again, so that at least the people who came just to walk, just to feel good, just to pretend they're someone other than who they are, has to witness people who will do at least a little bit more. And maybe that will have a little galvanizing and transformative effect in terms of consciousness where they're willing to risk the equivalent of a parking ticket.